There's a few things here, a few things everywhere, in fact, come to think of it. I've got a thing here in front of me. Now, do you realise that depression in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5, the major depression, the likes of which was never experienced.
But the point is, there will be a depression, and it will be very nasty. It will be nastier than the 1930s depression, which was very nasty in its own right, I might add. And the reason why the next depression will be extremely nasty for most people is because most people are very leveraged financially and domestically in their houses, particularly their houses. The average person is extremely leveraged. And I don't want to bore you with finance because it is very boring and I won't bother mentioning it. But what I will say is, and I'll try to be as explicit as I can be, that over the next 5 years, it could be the next year, it could be the next month, it could be the next 4 years. I don't have a flag in front of me that will tell me exactly when it will happen or a signpost. But there are a whole lot of things unwinding, and I won't bore you with them, that could indeed, more than just unwind, they may explode in front of your eyes, and the next day when you wake up you'll think, my God, that can't be true. And you go back to sleep, and you wake up again and you find, it must be true, it's still happening. And what happens when the Dow Jones Index, I don't know if you know what that is, but anyway, it's an indicator of American companies, 30 major companies in the United States. You might wake up one day and you'll find the Dow Jones Index hasn't dropped 300 points or 500 points. It's dropped 5,000 points in one day. You know, that is a massive drop. And then there'll be a bit of a pullback, 300 or 400 points, and people might think, oh, that was over. And then it drops another 3,000 points a few days later. And before you know it, the whole financial system, as we understand it, has collapsed totally. Rhonda, can you mind not interfering with my incredibly perfect delivery here, if you don't mind? This is extremely methodical, what I'm trying to get forward here. But anyway, you can get quite wealthy in the meantime before this actually unwinds. And I'll mention gold straight away. Gold. It's always been a store of wealth in times of turbulence. It hasn't always worked. It hasn't actually always mimicked detrimental things that have happened within the economy, but it is happening now. In 1980, gold got to $850 an ounce. In today's purchasing power, value power, gold would need to go to about $2,200 to equate to the $850 value in 1980. Gold is now about, $862, I think, at the last call the other night, $862. So you've still got at least $1,000 in front of you. And so, you know, to equate to the previous high, so you could be talking $3,500 as a top for gold over the next 3 years or so. It'll be pretty rapid, so you'll have to be pretty quick on your feet. You know, the financial system, before it melts down, it does a lot of rapid things, very rapid indeed. You've got to be very quick. And you've got to get out. Buying into a position is the easy part. That's the easy part. And I know from experience, it's the selling that's the hard part, the timing. Timing. It's like in real estate, position. Well, in the share market, it's timing. And you could have the best stock in the world. It could meet all the financial fundamentals. But if you don't sell out of it in time and ride it all the way down for the next 10 years, you've got nowhere and you haven't realised an opportunity. You could buy it back in 5 or 10 years' time at a third of its cost that you sold it for. There's a whole lot of tricks in the financial world, and the share market is the most graphic one because it's always before your eyes in the press, on TV, on the internet, particularly the internet. The internet is very good. I'll just mention to you www.asx.com.au. If you look up that website, www.asx.com.au, you'll find a wealth of information as far as the Australian financial system is concerned, as far as the share market is concerned. If you're intuitive kink, being able to read charts. It's a bit like tea leaves, but a bit more methodical and a bit more reliable than tea leaves. You could make a fortune. You could lose a fortune too, of course, if you read it wrongly and get caught up, as many people do. Well, that's what makes if there weren't any losers, there wouldn't be any winners. There's got to be a majority of losers for a minority of winners. That's how the financial system works. There is never a majority of winners. It's always a minority of winners and a majority of losers. It's never the other way around. If it was, the financial system would collapse because everyone would be falsely wealthy. And so we'll never have that happen. But about the depression that's likely to unfold, well, if you go back to the 1930s, and that's not that long ago in human terms, it's like yesterday in terms of our current civilisation. The thing is, in the 1930s, nobody in the 1930s had credit cards. There was no such thing, right? Personal loans in the 1930s were very rare, but a lot of people did have mortgages with their various banks in the 1930s. And so when the Depression unfolded, when stocks collapsed in 1929 and house prices collapsed thereafter, almost simultaneously in fact, everybody lost their capital assets. They came down massively in value. The banks tried to recall their loans, but of course they couldn't because the assets backing the loans were worthless. And so the banks went under because all their assets that they extended in terms of loans folded, and the banks folded, many of them folded. And so that was the 1930s meltdown. And it took about 10 years before oxygen got back into the system. And of course the Second World War totally recharged the US economy and other economies, and it was ironically it was the Second World War that sort of got the economic processes into healthy fundamentals. It's unfortunate it takes a war to do it, but that's not the point. The thing is, it worked and that happened. And then we had prosperity in the 50s and 60s in Australia in particular. We rode on the sheep's back, and in the 60s, 70s and 80s we rode on the minerals boom, and now we're still riding on the minerals boom. And uranium in particular, of course. We're selling a lot of that, and even to rogue states, but we're selling uranium. And so at the moment we're doing reasonably well, but there will be a massive meltdown, unfortunately. The Dow Jones Index is around at the moment 12,800 points. It got up to, I think, nearly 14,000 about a month ago. It may have another surge because the financial institutions in the United States and in the Arab world and in China and in India, they don't want the United States economy to unfold because they have massive interests in the United States. The Chinese sell, I believe, 2/3 of its output to the United States consumers. The last thing the Chinese want is for a US meltdown. So the Chinese will try to prop up the United States economy. Likewise, the wealthy Arab regimes, particularly Saudi Arabia and a couple of others, India too. So there may be a last desperate ditch to prop up the financial system, but when that finally explodes and there's no longer any method of saving it, the downside will be massive, and I mean massive. People in Australia, and I'll just talk about Australia, will lose their houses left, right and centre. The banks, which are currently making $4 or $5 billion a year, that is out of the four majors, will no longer be doing that. Their CEOs will probably be told to see another day somewhere else. The banks will unfold rapidly because their asset bases will diminish, will vaporise. Everything will grind to a halt, or nearly so, in the next 5 years. But I can't give you a timing. But if you want to make money, gold is probably the next thing, but it won't last very long. It may get up to $2,000 or $3,000.